Shiloh, we're sitting here in silence, but I'm really... It's the sound of silence.
Great podcast.
I know, it's a great podcast material. I'm really, really grateful that you're here today. It's talking to a rock professor, rock legend. I wonder if people in South Africa always appreciate who you are, because I don't understand how you came to this point. Listen, I'm going to talk about this book now. I appreciate it. But in terms of rock history, I think you are the guy in South Africa that has got incredible knowledge surrounding it. The guys you've met, the stories, the written riffs, these talks you've done all across the country regarding guys you've met. And I want to ask you, what is your fascination with rock? What is it about rock that intrigues you so much?
Well, I think going back in my history, I wasn't a very good scholar at school.
Okay.
I didn't go to university. I didn't go to college. I barely made matric. I went to a cram college called Victoria House. So I decided to be... Well, I had a fascination with music from a very young age, and I became a little bit of a geek. My sister was blonde. She was very attractive. She was the belle of the school. So all the guys would come and visit my sister, and then they would hear this music. And that kind of really put me on the map as somebody who knew his music, because I knew I was nothing else. I was nothing else. And then I started working in record shops in the 70s. And you mentioned rock professor. I think we can equate that to Chris Pryor, because I didn't exist between... Yeah, I didn't exist. I mean, I had a record shop in the Circle Centre in Somerset West in 1981-82. And as some people said, you disappeared off the map for 12 years. And I did. I ended up in Israel for 7 traveled the world, worked on pirate radio stations. So I wasn't part of what I call the intellectual radio presenter hub of South Africa. That was the guys like Rafe Levine, Benji Moody, the hub of what they call the real rock professors. I came in like out of nowhere in the mid-90s, along with Steve Siegerman, who discovered Rodriguez. We came out of nowhere.
It's an interesting story, I think, with Rodriguez, but still, as humble as you are, a lot of people do refer to you as a rock professor because of this strange mystical sense that you have with music. And it's not everybody that knows their rock history so well, and it's not everybody that's met so many people. How did you manage to meet so many well-known musicians? I mean, Jimmy Page, you've met Jimmy Page. We spoke about Led Zeppelin earlier. You've met these guys, Ginger Baker. How did you meet all these people?
Well, when I started writing the book, there was no Wikipedia, no Google, and limited information about a lot of groups. The Melody Maker and the New Musical Express in the 70s, when CNA was around, but of course that all closed down. And so the only way to get the real story was possibly the sleeve notes at the back of an LP or actually tracking these guys down. So a lot of my stories are around tracking these guys down.
So I would say you're a journalist more than a professor, in your opinion.
Yes, I am. Yes. I did study post-journalism many years after I left school. So closer to that,
And so you kind of got these stories of these guys and put it in this incredible book, Seeker's Guide to the Rhythm of Yesteryear. I love it.
Well, the stories of the rock stars aren't in there. That's just the biographical status of the groups and the albums and recommendations. Yeah.
What is it about 60s music? I read an interesting article about you that was written years ago. I found it. And it said when you did your show, I think you had a late night show, like you still do now, the Magic Bus. But before that, you had this fantastic rock show. And the guy said you took techno CDs and you bashed it before your show. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, I smashed quite a few to pieces with a mallet. Somebody at the Gordons Bay Tullis Tavern offered me 50,000 Rand if I would play a techno song.
Oh.
And I didn't. Because I thought my name would go down the drain.
So you smashed it.
And Charles, who was in charge, he put him up to it, and he said he'd give the guy double the money if he would pay the guy the 50,000 rand if I agreed, because Charles knew I would never go to that level, even if it was money. Even if I needed money, I wouldn't go to that level. But I did have a big problem with sequence rhythms destroying music. I had a big problem with that. Lack of musicianship.
Do you still have a problem with that?
No, I got older.
You got older and
I've given in. I mean, when your niece starts hammering you with rave, and I mean, there's so many names now. You know, you've got trance, you've got this and that. It just... And look, I listened to Tangerine Dream in the 70s, which wasn't quite sequence rhythms. It was instruments being played. But the average modern generation would find it very difficult to know the difference between Tangerine Dream of the early 70s and trance today, except they play the instruments.
Because of the psychedelic essence of it.
More the minimalism of it was quite, you know, it's very similar to the trance. But you mentioned something about mystical.
Yes, absolutely.
That is one part of me that probably separates me from all other musicians. Is I get really deep, maybe too deep, to be honest, too deep sometimes.
Yes.
And I go into the spiritual side of music, and what I said was that God threw down a ball of creativity in the 60s. And it wasn't just musicians that ate off it, you know, Picasso, all of them. You know, it was just an incredible time of what I call creative thinking. It doesn't matter whether it's Andy Warhol or if it's a rock band or psychedelia. And yes, drugs all played a part of it, mescaline and all of that. But there was great poetry also that came forth, and great books, and, you know, Catcher in the Rye, all these incredible conspiracy books. And it was just a great time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you think of Led Zeppelin, that's one of my favorite bands, and that's influenced bands right now.
Yeah.
Greta Van Fleet, I think that
Definitely.
has been highly influenced by Led Zeppelin, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah.
But the 60s was so rich of, as you say, something quite mystical in the world of rock and roll.
It was very real then. Look, music has become, the golden era of music is finished.
That's sad.
No, it truly has. I mean, even David Gilmour echoes that. You can't make, it's very difficult to make money on music. You know, there are no CD players. You can't even sell your CD at a function because nobody's got a CD player in their car even. The cars don't come out with them.
Yes.
So it's very sad, and where music is at the moment.
But what is the point then for rock? I mean, I know guys in South Africa that do rock, and really good rock. What happens if you decide, I'm a rock?
Listen, I make very little money on my books, and people say, why do you do it? And I say, because I'm a writer.
Because you just
I'm a writer. I have to write. Whether I make money or not, I have to write. If you're a guitarist, you have to play guitar.
You have
it's
to.
In you know, Frank Zappa said, it's in me. If I make no money, I'll still be doing what I'm doing.
It's like Picasso said, I'll be in prison and I'll still paint with my tongue on the prison floor.
Because you're a painter.
You know? But I just think in terms of rock in South Africa specifically, it's such an underrated genre. I think if you're in countries, I mean, I have such empathy because I adore rock, as you know. But the radio stations, the stuff, it feels to me like there's a lot of singles coming out, solo artists as a rock platform. Where is it?
Blame it. Look, you can blame it on these television shows in America. You know, how many times, and I say it, my radio station is interviewing a musician and a band, and the engineer is the band, and the guitar and the drums is all coming from a PC, and that's the only way they can promote their songs, is to go onto a platform with a backtracking. So it's always nice when you meet somebody who's written songs and they actually pull out a guitar or a violin or
amazing.
You know, then I say, well, thank God, you know, at least there is a musicianship quality here. Because you get so tired of, I'll give you a good example.
Okay.
And Adele. Adele came from the Pop Idol platform. And she morphed into what I call a rock musician. But when the power went down in Paris, she was on autotune and it went off, and her voice sounded terrible. Okay. And then she even swore over the mic and said, oh, people are going to think I'm now mimicking. And Tony Visconti wrote a damning article about her. And so did I. what do you expect from somebody who started off as a pop idol? It doesn't matter how much she tries to be a rock musician. Is she really? And she's got a foul mouth. Of course, on BBC, she let rip and ripped Tony Visconti apart, and Mr. No One from South Africa. My surname's Noone.
Yes.
So she used that. Yeah. No but I think point in question is Robert Plant didn't use an auto-tune.
Those guys.
Nor did John Anderson of Yes.
No, they didn't. I mean, that rock voice is something that is just superb. Foreigner.
Paul Rodgers, good example, one of the greatest rock musicians ever.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, what a voice. No auto-tune. Even when the equipment was failing, they would still do well. This is amazing, playing on stages with gale force winds, and there was always something going wrong. But they never failed to impress because they are master musicians and vocalists. You can't get away from it.
No, you can't. And it's interesting that you say that the auto-tune thing, there was an auto-tune back now. It's
there were no auto-tune in the mid-70s. They had a thing that could put echo onto your voice and that kind of thing. So they used that in A Whole Lot of Love. But it's very difficult to utilize that at a live concert. So they would rather just, you'll see when you listen to Zeppelin live, many of the versions you don't hear any echo because it's actually very difficult to actually enact that when you're doing live. You've really got it, because if you make a mistake, it really, really stuffs the whole song up. So it's a different edge completely.
It's interesting for me, the 60s music, and you said that we were talking about the bow, the violin bow,
yes.
With Jimmy. I thought Jimmy Page was the one.
No, it was Eddie Fisher of the band Creation. He innovated that in 66, maybe end of 65, 66. Ron Wood was part of that band, by the way, in the Stones. And Jimmy was at that stage playing with the Yardbirds, and he watched this, and that's where he got the influence from. The violin bow application.
Because there's a lot of experimentation that happened then, and then things were new.
Yes.
And then you could go and,
Very much. And also, might I add, there was another musician that did it long before him called David Lindley from a group called Kaleidoscope, who did a lot of the musicianship for Jackson Browne and all that. He was a multi-instrumentalist, and he was playing around with that also in about 1967. Zeppelin only came together in 69.
Right.
But Jimmy wasn't using violin bow on the Yardbirds.
Interesting.
Not quite there, unless he was doing it in a studio, but I doubt it.
Because Albert Frost is now also kind of doing that thing with
wonderful violin bow application that he's using at his concerts. I've been watching him with that. And he better watch out. There's competition coming up. A band called Earth Blues.
Earth Blues.
Where the guy's got a Rory Gallagher application. He's young. And he's an absolute genius on guitar. I think he's under the cover of the guy from Boulevard Blues Band, the guitarist. Pryor. I think Pryor's kind of marketing him. But what I've seen of this guy, it's very often that I fall apart these days watching guitarists. And I could not believe what I saw. I thought, finally.
Finally.
Well, we have we don't get a lot of prodigies.
No, you don't get a lot of prodigies. But I think also in this country, in terms of blues and that kind of thing, I think musicians are suffering a bit in terms of, these kind of guys that knows their crafts, and they perform a lot. I mean, they're performing all the time. They've got kids, They
have to perform.
So they have to perform in order to make a living.
Yeah.
I don't think the money is always that great anymore. It was
it's not.
At one point better. Now it's a little bit of a problem.
It's terrible at the moment.
So
musicians, with all due respect, they're literally on the road 7 days a week touring. I've been watching them all over, going to little Karoo towns, little villages, pubs in the middle of nowhere. I mean, Jongensfontein. Can you believe that? I mean...
And I like Jongensfontein.
I know, but I didn't even know there was a venue there where you could play.
In Stilbaai, there's a venue. I read about it the other day.
Jongensfontein.
Would you perform in Jongensfontein on the beach?
I don't know. I just think that, it was so sad to see two guys playing blues at the Gecko, and they're trying to sell their CDs, and every time people would come in and say, how about buying a CD? And they say, we don't have a CD player.
They don't have a CD player. At the same time, I think that, maybe it's changed. Maybe performances are coming back. I mean, if you don't perform, you don't make money.
No, if you don't perform, you don't make money. And that is why you can't, I know a young girl, she's really, really got an amazing voice. And she goes as the Bird.
The Bird.
The Bird, yeah.
Yes,
and amazing songs. I've heard it on numerous radio stations online. But she doesn't it's backtracking. I've never seen her play an instrument. So, the only way she's going to have to get out there is to be able to play her music, to bring her craft to the people. If you don't do that, you'll disappear under the sheer mass of how many people are actually coming forward, putting music.
The Bird, wasn't she? She's an international.
No, she's a local surfer girl from Hermanus.
Okay.
I think her first name is Bianca.
Sure, okay,
And
I'll definitely look at her.
Incredible voice. And it was a tickle for her. You know, she did it for her legacy and for her children. So maybe there's a different edge there.
Right.
She's not living on hard times or anything. But
yes,
if you were an artist or a musician and you're on hard times, you really got to go out there and you've got to make it work. And now the vinyl reissues, obviously a lot of guys are going that route. I see Valiant has just brought out in the Valley of Darkness, a very good vinyl. Very good. I listened to it and I thought, wow, you know, I don't know a lot of guys that are bringing out vinyl reissue of their albums, but that was pretty cool.
Probably go back. But I mean, what do you think they can learn, modern rock musicians from the 60s, in order to expand their music? What do you think it is?
Well,
what is the hidden mystic? If
you go, look, let's go to 1996, the Britpop invasion. That was a complete emulation of the 60s culture, the mod culture. So you had great bands like Pulp, Cooler Shaker, Suede, and then, of course, the age of Oasis, you know, and it was just that time, Stone Roses, you had really, really good groups, and they were all marketing themselves the way the Beatles and the Who did. The mod sound, the mod look, black slacks, stripes, motionless on the stage. Hair crop was similar, the grunge hair crop. And then suddenly it was gone. You know, Eddie Vedder and all those guys were forgotten. You don't hear them. They don't get played on radio anymore. And they were really Supergrass. They were great bands. But you do not hear their music anymore. And then nothing really happened from that point onwards. But then you had a revival with groups like Green Day and Coldplay.
Right, and all of that kind of... Coldplay.
And incredible albums. I mean, take Throwing Copper. It's probably one of the most incredible albums I've ever heard in what it called, and it's not even the modern generation anymore where we are now, but at that time, I thought it was a pretty amazing album. Or Metallica. You know, they brought out some really, really good music. But even Metallica now owns their own vinyl plant,
right,
you know, where they make their own LPs of their albums. So people are waking up.
I am missing the idea of albums because there's so many singles. I don't blame musicians because it's a whole different scenario now where you bring out a single.
Yeah.
You know, but I miss the whole album story. I think Hysteria is probably one of my favorite albums. You know, as an album together, Back in Black. So you had this album that people brought out.
It's a great album.
You know, and that was the thing, the producer and you know, all those guys.
And you showed off.
You showed
off.
Up
in the lounge and people would talk about it. It was a subject matter.
Because Whitesnake was also recording with Def Leppard, I think, at the same time.
Yes.
There was a bit of competition there between them.
There's an incredible connection between Whitesnake and retro groups from the early 70s like Deep Purple and so forth. You know, they're all musicians that have evolved, but they came from very good roots. So they were always good, incredibly good. Trapeze was one of the examples, a band called Trapeze.
I don't know Trapeze.
Those members went on to groups like Whitesnake and Judas Priest and Deep Purple.
So music was very much your thing, even from school, if we take it back, because I'm so impressed with this Seeker's Guide to the Rhythm of Yesteryear. And in here, this is a seeker's guide. I would call myself a seeker.
Yes.
And there's information here.
Yes.
Just talk to me a bit about this book, and because it's
It took 20 years.
Okay. Wow.
Nobody wanted to edit a book that size. So the first editing would be the facts, which are pretty much okay to find because you're either wrong or right, but you can't exaggerate on facts of a group. You can give your opinion on whether you think this album is the better album to that album. So I gave my opinion, but I always give the fact and the members of the group and their albums, and then I cast some opinion as to what I consider to be the better album of that band. That's your choice. The book got a Rolling Stone 4-star award, and it also got a London Record Collector 4-star, which I was more proud of than the Rolling Stone, because in the actual book, I mentioned that Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles was a highly overrated album. If you consider that other bands like Frank Zappa did the same recording technique 1 year before. So when you do something like that, the British will hang you up from Trafalgar Square. I would have been stoned to death. But the guy still considered the book 4 stars, and I was very impressed by that. It meant a lot. It came a bit late. I almost felt like, I know this is a crazy equation, but I felt like Carlos Santana and Bob Dylan, when they finally got the nominee, like 20 years later.
You're like the steel heart that came out.
I'm just an author, but I felt the same way, like, okay, that's great. I got it. It only had come when I was a bit more younger and I could boast.
Well, it took 20 years.
It took 20 years, and the photographs took another 10 years to get credit, for the photographs that I was allowed to share them.
It's a beautiful book, and there are photographs in here, and then it says, I just opened at the age of rock and roll. So this book is really very special in terms of all the people that you've put together. And
it covers 8 genres, from rock and roll to surf guitars, psychedelia, blues, folk music, British beat, the time of the Beatles, prog rock, glam 70s rock. Only one genre isn't in there, jazz, because it's just too... That takes three of the books to be able to write something about jazz.
Are you going to start your jazz book?
No, I'm not going near that.
That could take another 20 years.
I don't want to come up against jazz aficionados. They're a different world. I know.
But these talks that you're doing, where you talk about guys that you've met, do you have any stories? I know there's a lot you're not going to be able to share.
Well, I was responsible for Love Buzz, which is Nirvana's debut single. I was in Amsterdam, and there was a group called the Melvins, and Kurt Cobain was not with them. The guy was Roger Osborne, and Kurt didn't pay a call girl, and they were going to throw him into the canal, because that's what they do. You just don't not pay the call girl. And we saved the day, and we went to the Bulldog. And while we were sitting there was a Dutch band playing on the speakers called Shocking Blue. They had a big hit, Venus, if you recall.
Yes, I'm your Venus.
But the song was Love Buzz. And he was drumming on the table, and he said, "This is an amazing track. What is this? What is this?" And I wrote it on a piece of paper, and I said, "Love Buzz" by Shocking Blue. 10 years later, I'm the DJ at the Up the Creek Festival, and the sun is setting, and I want to play Venus, and I hit the wrong song. I hit Love Buzz, and the whole dance floor was full. And some guy came to me and he said, "Cool, man, Nirvana." And I thought, what is this guy talking about?
Okay.
And I realized that Kurt had taken Love Buzz as the debut single. That was the one story. The other one was, do you remember the Axe on Underarm ad on television? It was a really cool song by the Seeds.
Right.
And I'd given that to an ad agency. It was written by Sky Saxon of the Seeds. And sad as it could be, he never got the royalties, and he actually died. And the third was, I don't know if you know the song "I Dance Alone."
Yes, I do.
Okay, now that is about Pinochet and the persecution of the people, another woman on the torture table, etc. I was working for the Rainforest Foundation in 1983 with Sting. He was the patron. And I said to Gordon Sumner, I said, "Listen, you need to worry about the people, not just the rainforest." He said, "What are you talking about?" And I'd worked for a group called Mordecai Outcry, and I had to list all the Jewish people and all the leftists and socialists that were disappearing. And I said, "Do you know that the only way you can reveal you've lost a loved one under Pinochet is to go to a hall and dance alone?"
Beautiful.
And I went to a hall where I saw 1,000 women dancing alone.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, "There's a song there." And he wrote "They Dance Alone."
It's a beautiful song.
So...
Is that from The Summoner's Tale? I Dance Alone. It's a I Dance
I don't know.
Alone.
Dream of Turtles, maybe?
Yes, that's it.
I think it could have been Dream of Turtles. Yeah.
I'll take a look at a beautiful song.
But, and by the same token, I had a run-in with... Because I didn't list Sting in my book. I was fascinated by his guitar teacher... John Hedley, who was in a band called Every Which Way. And when I met John, he said, "I suppose you want to meet Gordon." I said, "No, not really. I want
to meet you."
So I've got a photograph in there of John Hedley in the early days. And to the left, there's almost like on the side is a very young 18-year-old Gordon Sumner who was playing the group was called The Last Exit. And this is long before Police days. So when I met him at the One and Only, he said, he can't understand why he's not in the book. So I said, "Well, you were more 80s. He says, "But the Police was in the 70s. I said, "Yeah, but that was the new wave sound." And eventually he looked at me and he said, you don't really like my music, do you?" And I said, "No, well, not. It's just I've got so many other genres I appreciate." He said, I remember his words, somewhat refreshing but deeply disturbing. And then it was a crazy day because I was climbing into the chocolate croissants at the one and only. He was on the top floor. And I'll never forget it. There was a swimming pool up there. Don't ever think you can swim in a swimming pool in a penthouse, because there's so much pigeon shit there, you would not believe it. I'll never forget that, you know. And
is that what you remember?
I remember. That's what I remember. And I remember him saying, you seem to be really enjoying the chocolate croissants, because I was on to my like seventh one, you know, the best of breakfast. So, yeah, it was you know, and then the other one was probably not best to talk about, but I was also involved with, I probably can't share that because it's coarse.
Oh.
I can't share coarse. I'm not
no,
like, I'm not
you can,
like,
but
I'm not like Chris Kombe's, wat sê, ek gaan vloek.
Ja,
ek kan nie vloek nie, want
kan jy nie vloek nie?
Nee, ek kan nie, ek wil, maar
you don't want to pull an Adele, yeah. Oh no.
No, but I mean, Adele loves to, you know, she's got a dirty mouth, Adele. But, you know, all I can say is, I don't know, you know, I think for the sake of...
Maybe next time.
Yeah.
Maybe next time I'll give you a drink and then you can...
Okay, I'll share it one-on-one.
All right. Share it to me afterwards.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating as a journalist how I suppose it sounds a little bit esoterical, but you did go on a journey in your life to find the truth behind all these rock stories. What do you think these rockers have in common? What do you think it is about them?
Ego.
That's
the only thing they have in common.
Really?
Trust me, nothing else. Some are rich, some are making it, some aren't making it. But the one common thing is ego. And but might I add, not ego that you're a snob. I've met some wonderful people that have an ego, but they are the kindest musicians you'll ever meet. Like Michael Rutherford of Mike and the Mechanics. I'm going to be going to his concert. He's ex-Genesis. But you would never have wanted to meet someone like David Bowie. It's just some of these guys really believe they are God-given and way above you. And I've had some pretty bad experiences with Van Morrison. You know that Van Morrison had his own... Somebody wandered in and Van Morrison told the bouncers to beat him up. Why? And that night he didn't have a drummer because his own drummer had been beaten up. He didn't even know his own drummer. You know, when it gets to that level, you should actually resign from the business.
I suppose ego is in a way important because you're a performer. You know, I always say it's this kind of rock stance, you know, that people do. And it's a kind of a presence and it's a kind of a thing.
Well, Duncan Mackay was my mentor. And I mean, he was with 10cc, Alan Parsons, Budgie, some of the great bands. And he said, if you want to be a rock presenter, you got to think like I think. You are a rock star already. You are the man. Wear the hat. Walk in with the Spanish leather boots and the Dylan hat, because there's not a question. I do it.
But you do it. I think the problem is because in radio, I think the radio presenters have an ego, but it just doesn't work.
Well, when you
there's nothing to have an ego about.
When you're approaching 67 years of age, you can always say, I'm posing as an old rock star, but you can't do it if you're 25 or 26.
No, you can't.
So, you know, I've traveled the world. I mean, I can tell you something that was so hilarious. I was walking the Camino Compostela, which is a missionary walk from France to Santiago. And I had shaved my beard off, and somebody said, "You are Meatloaf." I said, "No." And the more I protested, they set up a website. I've just passed Meatloaf and he's looking very tired, but he's going to make it. And there was a website in America, Meatloaf on the Camino. I've just had coffee. I know he's going to make it. Just took a selfie with Meatloaf, and it went on and on until Meatloaf himself, at that stage, contacted the website and said, "Listen, I'm sitting here in L.A. I'm not walking the Camino Compostela." And that was a hilarious moment in my life. You know, you can't refuse it when the restaurant owner wants a selfie of, and his daughters are standing there, and then suddenly, you know, Meatloaf is smiling, and it's me, Shiloh Noone. I couldn't protest against it because they didn't believe me. The more I protested, he wants to remain anonymous. He's not admitting that he's Meatloaf.
But you look like a rock star, nevertheless.
Yeah, I've had this before, and it is a bit of a kick in my backside because obviously I present rock music. So I only play the Indian sitar, and it's not a popular sound. You're not really going to want to listen to me playing Indian sitar. Back in the 70s, maybe. So I've never really touched a guitar or any other musical instrument. So I stick to writing because that's my gift, storytelling.
That is a gift. Beautiful. And as a storyteller, I think that you've really succeeded with your books that you've written. I know you've written amazing books, and it's such a wide subject that I can't even, but Shiloh has written amazing books, A Bicycle, A Chess Set, An African Rhythm, River. I've never said an African Rhythm. River.
Yeah, that was my African story that has great sadness because they were about to shoot a movie and the filmmaker had just passed away, and Jamie Bartlett also passed away. He was going to be the priest in the movie, and they've all passed away. And it was getting quite exciting because Arnold Vosloo had the book. He was reading it in hospital in California, and he wanted to be in the movie, and then everything just disappeared.
Arnold Vosloo, I saw him holding this book. Didn't he hold this book as well?
No, he loved the book.
This book fascinates me.
It's been everywhere. It's been... I can tell you, I'll mention the bands that have it.
Mention them.
Jethro Tull, Uriah Heep, Deep Purple, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, 2 members at least of the band, Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton, David Gilmour, 6 copies of Pink Floyd. And when I had my 60th birthday party, I never hear from these guys. I got all.
Do they say thank you?
I got all these emails from these famous rock stars. But you don't go share those emails with the public.
No, you don't, because there's a kind of secrecy about it.
So when my friend at my 60th started reading them out, I don't think people believed it. So I didn't, it's just in a madness, you're having a 60th. And here's a message from David Gilmour. Thank you for your contribution to music. La, la, la. Really? And this one's from Eric Clapton's drummer. And it's really, and I'm not even going to try and defend this,
Yes.
But I have met these people, and some I stayed with. Members of the Rolling Stones, I stayed on a stud farm with them. Jimmy Page was a breakfast in Soho. Others, I stayed longer. Others was just a cup of coffee. Jack White was the whole night at the Hard Rock Cafe. And we spoke about music credits.
He's talented.
And I was sweating because I thought I was going to get the bull. When you're doing 9 cappuccinos on either side plus burgers and snacks at Hard Rock Cafe, I'm telling you, you've got a bill of £1,000.
No, definitely.
And he paid.
Thank goodness.
I was sweating like a pig.
Should I have one more cappuccino?
No, I just didn't. I wouldn't be able to pay for it.
Wanted to ask you for that, but I wasn't certain if I was allowed to ask you about
Suzanne Vega. I met her a very long time ago. There was a movie. She finally ended a movie called Pretty in Pink. So that was the end. But what is interesting about Suzanne Vega is all the songs that became a hit, like Luca and Marlene on the Wall, she wrote those in 1985. And they only became hits in 94. But Marlene on the Wall, and I'm going to tell you the story. There was a song by The Who called Pictures of Lily.
Okay.
About a guy lying on the bed masturbating, looking at pictures of... I keep getting this wrong. I actually got it wrong at the riff. It's not Lily Marlene. It's Marlene Dietrich.
Right.
I got it wrong.
Marlene Dietrich.
Yeah, just a stupid mistake.
Yes.
And she said, that's disgusting. I'm going to write a more beautiful, poetic song about Marlene Dietrich. So she wrote Marlene on the Wall.
Oh, wow.
Because she was disgusted by the Who song.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. So, and then she came and played here at Paul Kluwer. I went to go and see her. But that was, if you think 1985, 86, 87, that those songs were written. And
she's an interesting musician. I don't hear about her so much.
Very isolated vocals and poetry, very much like Nick Drake. I think she's got, presently at the moment, a bit of a cult following.
I like Blood Makes Noise. It's probably one of my favorite tracks.
Very intricate spaces that she creates, and her guitar work is very isolated. Nothing like Joni Mitchell, completely different edge. Almost minimalist in a style like,
is she in here?
Nick Drake. No, she's not 60s and 70s.
She's not 60s and 70s.
So I'm really making friends in great places.
Are you going to write in 80s, 90s?
No. I'm thinking.
You're sticking to the 60s.
I don't know. I've got another 20 years left. I try to understand.
You can write in 5 years.
I'll just write novels.
I think the 60s is far more such a profound time.
Unbelievable
in music history regarding that, and just meeting and following all these people. So who's the seeker? You are.
The Seeker is actually a song by The Who called They Call Me the Seeker. I looked under tables. I asked Bobby Dylan and I asked Timothy Leary. They call me the Seeker. So it's about seeking out the inner groove of the song and the story behind the song.
Interesting.
And all my life I've been a seeker.
Yes.
Whether it's for the spiritual truth or music or whatever. But, you know, in the long and the short of it, the music of that era, the poetry and the musicianship was, for me, where it was at. You know, it came out of the Vietnam War. It was protest. It was edgy. Even punk. You know, I'm not a big lover of punk music, but I've got a lot of respect for it because it's performance-driven. You know, when you have seen The Clash live, you have to admire them because there's a lot of energy being put into that. Performance-driven energy. And, you know, the punk music did destroy a lot of what I call the progressive rock period. But I've been in trouble. I mean, I made a comment this week that I've seen Zeppelin 4 times in my life, okay? And every time I've seen Zeppelin, I've found Jimmy Page to be extremely untidy on the guitar. Like,
are you going to get in trouble with?
Oh
no, you won't. I mean, I've
you
never
don't
seen
want
him
to come
live.
up. You do not want to come up against a Zeppelin fan.
No, I'm a huge Zeppelin
And you
fan.
know,
but you can say, I mean, it is what it is. You know, if that's what you found, that's what you found.
Look, I mean, if you compare to Alvin Lee and you look at each, you can hear each note analytically. But they were a great rock band. There's nothing to that doesn't take away. They were incredible.
It's the entertainment and the energy. It's that sense of entertainment.
Great
that
band.
I think is
I mean, John Paul Jones on bass, Plant, what a vocalist. You know, John Bonham, amazing body drummer. Whether you like it or not, they were a power, a force to be reckoned with. Didn't matter whether Jimmy was a little bit untidy on his lead breaks. It was the group together it was such a compounding force. It obliterated their fans.
Sometimes you just get a band that's a force. I would put Pink Floyd as a force personally. I would put Rush as a force.
Well, Pink Floyd, you know, it's interesting. David Gilmour said, you know, I've never been into speed and I'm not into speed. I was influenced by Jeff Beck and Hank B. Marvin of the Shadows, and I prefer more tone. And if you listen, you'll never find a David Gilmour piece where he's fast. It's more about tone and refrain and that beautiful instrumental soundscape that he creates. And I know there's been a battle between him and Roger Waters. I mean, I've spoken and been with both when he played, Roger Waters played here at the Velodrome, and chatted to him and to Snowy White. And yeah, and sadly I don't know if they've made up. I saw some Christmas photos of them together and I think it's AI. I don't think they talk to each other.
It's a pity.
Well, if you think that's a pity, don't ever mention Genesis to Peter Gabriel.
Really?
You know, yeah, I'm not even going to tell you. Yeah, don't.
That is such sad stories that you hear, because how is it possible? You know, Simon and Garfunkel, didn't they also have a little bit
Well, what
of an
about
issue?
CCR? They've been suing each other.
Yes, they have
Creedence have
been.
been suing each other for 30, 40 years.
And I don't think their music's much without John. You know,
John Fogerty was the leader, yeah.
Yes.
And I also made a comment, and I got hammered for it, that as much as they were a really great rock band, especially their drummer, Doug Clifford, especially the drummer, they are highly overrated, especially in South Africa, compared to the bulk of other rock bands. You know, I really am tired of hearing, as much as they wrote great songs, you know, if it's going to be Sweet Home Alabama by Leonard Skinner, or it's going to be CCR, Leonard Skinner have made so many other songs that are much better than that.
Because if you go on radio, that is the three songs.
That's the one they want to hear.
It's Sweet Home Alabama. That's it. I think that's the one that's on. And then Creedence Clearwater. You've got Bad Moon Rising.
That's the one they want to hear.
Around the corner.
But go and play Effigy.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody's heard of it.
But that's why I like the Magic Bus, because you're going all over the show with your...
I try and play the B-sides and the songs,
Yes.
like the Beatles songs you never heard, the Hollies songs you never heard, because we've heard He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, and it is an absolutely great song by the Hollies. But what about playing a Hollies song you've never heard of?
Exactly. So the Magic Bus, I just want to say, is on
My
Cape
avenue.
Talk. Yes, that's on
that's
radio.
That's my avenue for sharing the esoteric, the B-sides, the alternate sides, and so forth.
And how amazing of Cape Talk to allow you to do this. I mean, it is
It's a miracle.
show.
No,
It's a miracle.
It's 7 years now. I've surpassed some of the greatest rock DJs of South Africa. cannot believe I'm still there and haven't been replaced by Mr. McCausey or whatever.
Exactly.
And this could be, the contract runs till August, so this might be the epitaph.
I really hope it continues. Because
So do I, but I must admit it would be nice to be able to do something on a Saturday night that's not radio. Because all the bands, you know, that I want to go and watch, they're always playing on a Saturday night.
Tell them to play later.
Well, the good thing is there's a Crosby, Stills, Nash, Hatchet Man are doing a Crosby, Stills, Nash tour.
Oh, wow.
And that is worth going to.
Have you ever seen Neil Young live? I
That's
saw
one
Crosby, Stills and Nash.
I have not seen. I've seen Crosby, Stills and Nash. I've not seen Neil Young. I've seen the Who. I've not seen Neil Young. I would love to have seen Neil Young, and I believe if he had to come to Cape Town, he'd pack out. There are more Neil Young fans than actual Crosby, Stills and Nash.
And
fans.
Sean Phillips.
Oh, he's a friend of mine. We're very close.
I adore Sean Phillips.
He's phenomenal.
He is phenomenal.
He's
Woman
a phenomenal
is
singer,
one of my favorite
12-string guitarist, Indian sitar player, multi-instrumentalist.
Is he your friend?
Personal
I'm
friend.
a bit jealous.
Personal friend, and what a gentleman.
Because I went to watch him in Joburg, and it was packed. It was a bit of a sit down and listen experience for me.
Yes.
And what is his album? The Woman with the Train with that long title.
Oh,
the one.
the
woman with the.
Waiting at Toledo, whatever.
Yes.
That was off the second contribution album.
And his
but
hair.
Ballad of a Casey Dice
That's it.
was the song that everybody falls for. But the transit. Look, he had 2 folk albums. In the Greenwich umbrella, but then he had, first contribution, just called Contribution, and that was a remarkable album. And then there was 2 others that followed that were remarkable. And
I got a Sean Phillips CD actually at home.
No, look, Sean Phillips is, he's a fireman. He's a qualified fireman. I wouldn't be surprised right now if he's in California, because they were taking. He's a volunteer fireman, and I remember when I interviewed him at Fine Music Radio, he was very upset because he didn't have a scissors to cut the plasters correctly, and we had to go into every pharmacist to go and get the specialized scissors before we could do the interview.
Does he live in South Africa?
No, he's left. He's gone back to Texas.
He was here for a while. I heard
he married a South African woman.
Yes,
yeah.
That was what I heard.
He was here the bulk of, as far as I remember, the bulk of the 80s, some of the 90s. He was all over. But then he had a wonderful opportunity. Jimmy Donovan was touring, and he only took 2 musicians with him. Jimmy Page, who played on a lot of his backing, and Sean Phillips.
Isn't that amazing?
So they made quite a lot of money touring the world.
That's an incredible show.
Japan,
to watch.
all over the place.
I love Donovan.
I'm also a great fan.
I'm
of
a big fan of Donovan.
Me also. I won't lie.
I'm not going to say who he's.
And you can't compare him to Dylan because he didn't no protest. He did no protest. It's all love songs.
No, it's all love songs.
All his stuff was love songs. Most of it, 90%.
Whereas Dylan is a far other.
Different edge completely. By the way, the movie.
Yes,
I'm going to be seeing it tonight.
Oh wow! You must let me know how it was because.
Well, I've seen clips, and it's debatable. Some people say no, some people say yes.
It has to be like that.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I'm going to look forward to your opinion. And Bruce Springsteen documentary.
I've heard great reports about that. I've heard that On the Road documentary. I've heard incredible reports about that. I haven't seen it. So
fascinating how all these things are coming out now, all in a row. So I appreciate that. And, the mysticism of rock has always intrigued me. And I hope that you carry on seeking
mysticism.
The mysticism
Enlighten
of rock.
Enlighten me on that word.
The mysticism of. I think when there's rock, it's something mystical. It's just a mystical.
Look, Zeppelin. Zeppelin were very mystical. If it wasn't Tolkien, Lord of the Rings songs, it would be fairyland, mystical.
The Piper, the Prince of Peace, took his bow. I love that song.
Look, they all. I mean. 70s rock embraced Tolkien, sci-fi, fairies and goblins, anything magical and spiritual. If it was Luciferian, whatever, they embraced the variety of genre. I mean, the 70s had some incredible bands that I rank very underrated, like Blue Oyster Cult.
Yes,
very underrated.
Underrated.
I think extremely underrated. And then, of course, some of the bands. Near the end became, if you they started out really good, like Journey, Wheel of Fire, awesome. And then they just got into this, like, soppy, Styx did the same. They were a great rock band, and then they got a couple of hit singles. And the Doobie Brothers is another example. When they got that other dude in, he's just come back to them. They got into this like love songs and hit parade stuff. And the guy even started dressing differently when he performed with the group. That's why I still love the groups like Kansas, because they didn't sell themselves out for commerciality. They just did what they did, Yes. And Boston was also, although not really a traveling band, they were phenomenal 2 albums. Tom Scholz.
I only
created
an
orchestra of, the only 2. Yeah, he created an orchestra out of guitar. I'll never forget when I heard it in Friedman and Cohn for the first time. The whole of Friedman and Cohn seemed to be filling up with Boston because of the way they brought their sound out.
Amazing. And Yes?
Oh, now you're reaching deep.
Yes, so because Yes is always
Yes has always been, well, that's very progressive.
Yes.
But groups like Yes and Genesis, I grew up on that. But then I started digging deep into other progressive bands like Audience, Camel, PFM, Italian groups. And I found a whole bulk of a beautiful progressive bands. Beggars Opera from Scotland, who did a version of MacArthur's Park that would blow your mind with harpsichord and all.
Wow.
And, you realize how much, that's why it never stops. I can't look into modern day music because there's still so much good music in the 60s and 70s I'm finding because of that creative bubble.
Because of that bubble. I just wanted to ask you, which South African band do you think touched?
Hawk. There wouldn't have been a Jaluka without Hawk. Dave Ornellis's band, which combined Africa. Hawk introduced African music into rock in 1969-68. Now,
African music into rock.
Yes.
Actually, how did they marry their...
He even dressed up in Zulu feathers and danced on the stage long before. In fact, it was a young Johnny Clegg who saw this and was influenced. Hawk were phenomenal. Then they left that and he became the Raymer Band. He became quite a Christian, Dave Ornellis. But Hawk... There's no band that can compare to Hawk. No in the world. I mean, there were a couple of bands that rose up overseas, Jamaican bands, Nigerian bands that did do a little bit of kind of combo rock and African vibe. Osabisa is a good example.
Okay.
Very good example. Assegai. But Hawk were leaders. And that group, for me, stands out. And then, of course, our only real supergroup, whether you like them or not, was Rabbit.
No, Rabbit.
You can't knock them. I mean, Trevor Rabin went to Yes.
Yes.
Duncan Fora went to, they all went to famous bands. And then, of course, another group we tend to forget is the Flames. The members went to the Beach Boys.
Absolutely.
So that is, to the Beach Boys, hello. More hit singles than the Beatles.
Amazing.
Yeah, so incredible. The Fatah brothers, where they went and what they did. And, when you hear their songs in the 60s, they deserved it. Apartheid era, a bunch of Hindu envoy from Durban having to play behind curtains because of their color. And I don't blame them for leaving.
Do you know what album I was thinking of yesterday when I was just watching and listening to an interview of yours where you spoke about Seeker's Guide, was Graceland from Paul Simon. The fact that he came to film it or to record it, or he was highly influenced. Do you know anything about that album? Or what's your opinion of that?
Look, all I know, he was driving on the New York freeway and someone had given him a cassette of Black Mambaza. And he was at an all-time low in terms of songwriting. And he put this music on his cassette, in his car, and it just blew him away. That's the only side of that I know.
It's
and then he came here and it put him on the map.
It did.
I just watched a record thing in London where they say that album is still one of the greatest albums. It wasn't a big thing for me.
No, I don't think it was a big thing.
But I recognize it was an essential, quintessential album for its time. I'm a great Simon & Garfunkel lover.
I loved him. But I think it's so funny, or if not funny, but interesting, marrying rock or stuff with the African sounds.
Well, he was one of the first, if you call that combination, back in 1969, 68, he did an album with a South American band called Urubamba. Urubamba is the river that flows below Machu Picchu in Peru. And that was pan flute music combined with folk. And El Conde Pasa, you probably know that.
Yes.
If I had that song, obviously a Simon and Garfunkel song, but it's actually a song with its roots in South American folklore. So that was one of his first world music collaborations. And then there was another one where he did with a gospel band. But then, of course, Ry Cooder came along and just brought out a whole batch of, music from, say, Timbuktu combined with folk and blues, Indian sitar combined with folk and blues. He just brought the Cuban jazz thing. He embraced that.
Okay.
So Ry Cooder made a lot of money on the world music collaborations. But world music, those were the instigators of what I call world music from the 60s. It wasn't a common thing to fuse genre of different cultures.
It's a fascinating thing. Peter Gabriel with his
but much later.
Much later.
His WOMAD label, the WOMAD label embraced all of that. I mean, that was in the 80s. I mean, these guys were doing it in 68, 67.
So interesting.
So I mean, he caught on to that, and he did some great stuff. But looking back, I mean, Ry Cooder, Paul Simon were the guys who really got down to it, with the fusing of those genres.
So this book is for sale now, or it's on sale now? Amazon, is it right? Or
it's on all the portals in America.
Okay.
Do you know some of them? I can't remember.
I saw actually.
Amazon's one, but what are the other ones? What are the other ones?
I found
Barnes & Noble.
That's true. It's on there.
And then there's another one also online. They're all the major portals in America. And it's actually a great book to buy online. I'll tell you why. Because you can search. So when you get the book, you just search the band or the song and it'll go to the exact page.
It's amazing. I'm so grateful.
I do have copies privately.
All right. Maybe perhaps we could have somebody who's listened to it and really likes the podcast. If they've got an interesting question,
probably meet them for a cup of coffee and a signed copy. I do this. I do this when I pick up that there's a true passion in the person that wants to buy the book.
So what comment would you like for this person to possibly win one of your books? Perhaps. Are you listening? Interesting.
If they would like...
Can they subscribe to the channel? That could be cool.
Yeah. I think you mean give them a trivia.
Well, I think they can ask you a question, maybe what we've discussed or something like that. If they have a comment below or something they'd like to ask you, I think they can put in the comments below and you can select who you would possibly like to give a book to.
I tell you what, they must give their top 10 guitarists.
Okay, I love that. All right, top 10.
Top 10. And the one that I like, I'm going to award the book to. So I might anger some.
That's not really fair.
No. Well, I don't want to give a trivia because it's more difficult.
No, don't. I think the top 10 guitarists, I know how I'd put there.
Yeah.
But as well, if it's not your top 10, you still have respect for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, to a large degree, there's a lot of opinion. But I must just add one thing.
Add one thing.
Okay. It doesn't matter whether you like Van Gogh or Rembrandt. They're brilliant painters.
That's the thing.
So what I'm trying to say is, there are certain guitarists that have an incredible ability. You can't knock a guy like Mark Knopfler.
No.
Whether you like Dire Straits or not. He's a phenomenal guitarist. His application is based on J.J. Cale, and he's a great guitarist, okay? Whether you think Eric Clapton is overrated, and he is, he's still a phenomenal blues guitarist. You can't take that away.
Absolutely.
Okay?
No, you can't.
But, when you start nominating a shredder, like maybe Ace Frehley or Sting.
Don't say anything against my Ace Frehley.
Of course, I would hate to do
I'm
that.
a big fan of Kiss.
I have figured, your generation.
Ace Frehley.
So, what all I'm saying is there are different styles. I mean,
Are you looking for specific guitars in a certain...
No, not necessarily. I accept Yngwie Malmsteen, Satriani are all brilliant guitarists. Okay, they are phenomenal prodigies. It's just that sometimes, because a particular person loves a particular band, they will say that this guy is really like, the AC/DC guitarist is really top of the goal, when he's not actually. He's just he's a great guitarist, but he's nowhere near the top 50.
All right, I get
popularity,
what you're saying. In popularity, but let's
not
just say
in aficionado. Not aficionado.
Guitarists that has changed the guitar sound. Then you're talking about something very interesting, and I had a discussion about that the other day.
Look, you know, there have been many cases. I mean, the Zappa camp.
Frank Zappa wasn't the best guitarist.
He was a very, very good guitarist, but he recruited some of the top musicians.
He recruited Steve Vai.
Exactly. They all came out of that camp.
He was just a brilliant leader in terms, and phenomenal.
But he was a brilliant guitarist, Steve Vai. You can't take that
No, he was
away.
a brilliant guitarist.
Yeah.
Frank Zappa wasn't, I would say, the best guitarist.
Well, he's ranked pretty high, eh?
But
he's
compared
ranked
to
pretty,
Steve Vai?
Oh, no. Well, I don't know at that time. Zappa may have been better than him at that time.
All I know is
Adrian Belew is a good example.
I want that poster of Frank Zappa on the toilet. I want it for my bathroom. You know where he's sitting on the
It's
toilet?
the kind of house I'd like to live in.
Thank you. But I mean that it's the kind of poster
You go, girl, because that...
I'm gonna order that
I'm
poster.
certain Moon Unit would love you.
Moon Unit would probably... Dweezil would probably possibly...
He'll probably come play in Cape Town if he knew that.
Okay,
You know.
then there you go.
But guitarist is a very emotional aspect, because if you love a guitarist and you haven't put them in the top 20,
yes,
then normally what is thrown at you, well, it's a personal perspective, but not quite. There is, you know, whether you go Rolling Stone or London Record Collector, wherever, there is what is regarded as the top guitarist, and then obviously what is, you know, there are the shadow guitarists that are really good, that are in bands that are not well known. But then you get the really good bands, and they would like start nominating their guitarist as a good guitarist, and it's not quite.
Look, I think as some musicians just suit a band, like Ringo Starr suits a band, doesn't mean to say he's the best.
Perfect example. A great timekeeper. Perfect example.
So if I look at Jimi Hendrix, I mean, he's irreplaceable for me in music history.
His creative ability is irreplaceable.
Yes. So we're talking about those guitarists.
Yes.
We're not talking about someone that fits in a band that's good for the band. We're looking at someone who has that impeccable.
I'll give you an example of a shadow guitarist
tone.
that nobody's heard of. Tommy Tedesco.
Who?
Tommy Tedesco.
Don't know.
He's played on every James Bond theme.
Okay.
He's played on every hit of the 60s. He was part of the Wrecking Crew. Billy Strange and Tommy Tedesco.
Oh, right.
All the hits in the 60s. You look, there's a woman bassist, and there's these two guitarists, Tommy Tedesco and Billy Strange, that are ranked as top in their genre. And then you take a band like Seals and Cross, Louis Shelton, who nobody really knows, but Guitar Man by Bread was dedicated to him. Now, these are the shadow guitarists.
The shadow guitar.
Or even in America, I think Louis Knetschnell.
Yes.
A brilliant guitarist, but nobody really knows him. He played on all the Bread lead guitar bits on America. So I call those shadow guitarists. They are regarded very highly, but they're not in the forefront. They're always in the back, in the session room, and so forth. You know, Elvis had some really good guitarists.
And I did not know, I only heard that from listeners the other day, or from Deveta actually, that Toto was behind Michael Jackson's Thriller, because I thought it was Eddie Van Halen with Billie Jean, but
No. Eddie Van Halen was the main riff on that big hit of.
But Toto was a lot of session musicians as well. So those are guys that are really good.
And also,
you know?
I think I may be wrong. I think Earth, Wind and Fire were a backup band with Phil Collins for many years.
So interesting.
So, but you are right. You are right. It was Eddie Van Halen that played on that main riff.
And then it was
Toto. The Toto is this Jeff Porcaro and these guys.
They
are top. They are incredible musicians.
So in order to get this book, you have to name. So I think we understand the rules.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to...
You don't be too strict, okay? But I think if there's a list of 10 good guitarists...
No, if they're going to say Kurt Cobain, they definitely, as much as I love him, you're going to get a thumbs down, okay?
It's not the most...
Okay. You know, I'm just
you're
being
just being honest.
Okay,
All right,
okay.
thank you. And in this book, I think, and I'll also put the links below, so that it's the most important book to have, Seeker's Guide. I can't speak about all your amazing work, but it's an absolute pleasure having you on this music podcast, because I have learned so much. Seeker's Guide to the Rhythm of Yesteryear, which I got gifted because I can name the top 10 guitarists that I absolutely
We'll
love.
discuss that over
We'll discuss
coffee.
that over coffee, but I think I'm going to get your approval. And I just want you to sign it. And it's got absolutely, from 1950 to 1979, a summarized history and definitive reference to music by Mr.
You know,
Shiloh
just 1950,
Noone.
Elvis only came to be the mid-50s. People think Elvis started everything. There were a lot of great rock and roll bands before Elvis.
Name one.
Dale Hawkins' band.
Okay.
He's the man who did the Susie Q riff for Creedence and all that.
Right.
James Burton was his name. He played behind Elvis. There's a good example. Dale Hawkins' band.
And that's all of that is in here.
It's all in there.
Well, then there you go. This is the
Gene
history.
Vincent and the Blue Caps. I mean, the guitarist's name was Cliff Gallup. Jeff Beck said he wouldn't be anywhere without Cliff Gallup's. You know that Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps, every single they made had 3 lead guitar breaks in. You know, singles like 2.5 minutes?
Yes.
3 lead guitar breaks on every single they brought out.
Amazing.
Think of that.
I'm thinking about it.
Not even Zeppelin could do that.
No.
3 complete guitar breaks, like hefty guitar breaks by Cliff Gallup.
I love it because there's one thing I love is a guitar solo. Look, give me a guitar solo any day, and I will be a happy woman. So that's absolutely amazing. And the written riffs, when you go around the country talking about.
I've put that aside now. I might do one in Amanus as an epitaph, but Stefan Skutt is now doing the biography of Gert Flocknell. So I've lost him now because he's suddenly gone into the Burger and he's doing some great reviews of books. His whole career has taken a diff. He's sold up. He's moved to the West Coast. He's embracing the cool kamers there, and he's doing some. I mean, he's met up with all the musicians here, and he's a wonderful person, and he's got such a wonderful way of expounding in his writing, and he is doing some amazing stuff that's going to be coming forth. Watch that space in the years to come. But I'm very proud to have actually joined forces with him on the written riff, because he is the writer. I'm just the storyteller, and there's a big difference
between a writer and a storyteller.
Yeah, I write stream of consciousness. It can start off and end up in a scribble. Editors hate me.
I know why. Shiloh, thank you very much. I hope to chat to you again soon.
Absolutely.
Because there's so many stories you've got to tell.
Well, I hope that will help you with your rock show.
Well, I'm going to read through it, and I can't wait for those 10 guitarists. If you can just put them in the comments below, I'll let you know, and you can select. And we're gonna get them,
and they'll get a book signed by me.
And it will be a signed book.
Now, I'd preferably like to meet them for cappuccino and hand give them the book.
Okay.
Because providing they don't bring an axe with or anything.
That would be interesting.
But the fact that they've chosen, I've accepted their nominations.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Shiloh. And listen, I'm going to put all your contacts below for bands that feel that they've been excluded from this and want to give you a piece of their mind, or bands that feel that you should write another book.
Look, stones don't affect me at my age anymore.
Great. That's incredible, Shiloh Noone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.